Welcome to HoodooTube. One of my all-time favorite classic 1950s movies is The Ten Commandments, starring Charlton Heston, Ann Baxter, and Yul Brynner. Now, obviously, this movie was created when black actors had no starring roles in major motion pictures, and the glaring truth of this film is that most, if not all of these characters, would have been black, African, or people of color in the original stories. Most people who saw Egyptian films of this era just assumed Egyptian royals were white or Arab because of the casting, but now we know the truth. Yet Hollywood still is casting white and Arab people as ancient Egyptians. Despite these inaccuracies, the film was seen as groundbreaking in its time for its unprecedented production size and its use of color and visual effects. The Ten Commandments aim to tell the entire story of the Hebrew figure Moses, who was born as a Hebrew slave in a time when the Hebrews were enslaved by the mighty Egyptians. According to most historians, this never happened, but it does make for a compelling story. When the reigning pharaoh grows weary of astrological prophecies from his greatest astrologers and royal magicians, who continue to tell him a deliverer is prophesied by the Jewish people, he orders all the firstborn Hebrew sons in Egypt to be murdered. Moses' mother, Miriam, weaves a basket and puts her newborn baby Moses in the Nile River in the hopes he is found in another land, but is actually found by an Egyptian lady, a royal, who decides to raise him as her own. But as a prince of Egypt, his identity as Hebrew makes him a threat to the Egyptians who refuse to see him take the throne of Egypt. I love Ann Baxter as Nefertiti in this film. She's one of my favorite old Hollywood starlets, despite the fact that a black woman should have played this role. This drama she brings to the story is epic, as she plays Moses' royal love interest, who wants to protect him from the jealous Ramses. Yul Brynner was epic as Ramses, a man who never wanted to see Moses, his adopted brother, become pharaoh over him. Because we're in the age of the remake, I wouldn't be surprised if we see another depiction of this movie or the animated musical Prince of Egypt in the future. There would definitely be no excuse to not have an all-black cast for this movie. In fact, I would intentionally cast an all-black cast for the Egyptian and African roles, and I would cast mixed race and light-skinned people to portray the Hebrews because yes, there were and still are East African Hebrews and Jewish people who have been in East Africa for thousands of years. I could see actors like Zendaya, Will Smith, Beyonce, Mahershala Ali, Regé-Jean Page, Lupita Nyong'o, Aaron Pierre, and Viola Davis, etc., playing major and minor roles in an epic movie like this. Iconic athlete and film star Woody Strode plays the Ethiopian king, who meets with Moses and the pharaoh after Moses creates an alliance with the Ethiopian kingdom. The Ethiopian princess, Princess Tharbis, is played by actor Esther Brown. While the rivalry between the Egyptians and Ethiopians is true, again, we must remember the Egyptians were also black. There were so many miracles throughout this story, which is what makes the story so memorable. And even when Moses is ruling as a prince of Egypt and a powerful military and political figure, he is kind to the enslaved people, which already made him a hero in the Hebrew people's eyes. When Moses and Nefertiti find out that he was actually born Hebrew, Moses goes on a path to discover his roots and live amongst the slaves. When everyone finally discovers his secret and Moses kills an evil Egyptian taskmaster for abusing another Hebrew slave, Moses is banished by the reigning pharaoh, his own adoptive father, for betraying the throne. Moses walks the Egyptian deserts alone, in exile, but stumbles onto desert nomads who take him in as their own. I love this part of the story as well, because again, it's a reminder that the people in this story are black. Moses finds his future wife Zipporah and her sisters at a watering well, and he is adopted into the Bedouin clan by the Sheik of Midian, the descendants of Ishmael. Bedouins are a North African group of people who are mostly Muslim today, which is why Moses is an important figure in all of the Abrahamic religions, including Islam. When Moses finally starts to adapt to the Bedouin way of life, he heads into the holy mountains and he finds a burning bush that speaks to him using the voice of God. God speaks to Moses and instructs him to go back to Egypt and demand that Pharaoh free his people. There are interesting modern interpretations of this part of the story, because many modern scholars believe that the burning bush that Moses saw was actually a hallucinogenic plant that may have given him this spiritual vision. Moses and his family returned to Egypt and waged spiritual warfare on the royal Egyptians, but Ramses, who has now taken his place on the throne, refuses to free the slaves. One of the first miracles Moses performs is turning his staff into a snake, and the Egyptian magicians turn 2 staffs into snakes. But Moses' snake eats their snakes. If this was any other story, this would sound like a wizarding battle. There are so many compelling miracles, like when Moses and his God turn the Nile River blood red, or the hailstorm that spreads fire. One of the eeriest parts of this film is when Ramses threatens the firstborn of the Hebrews like his father did, but in turn, the Hebrew God strikes down the firstborn of the Egyptians, including Ramses and Nefertiti's son. In this film, the Holy Spirit is depicted as a green smoke that spreads throughout the streets of Egypt, killing any firstborn male who touches it. Even in this scene, when some of the Egyptians come to hide with Moses and his family during the Passover, I did notice that Moses' mother Bithia was surrounded by Ethiopian servants, showing that even they didn't want smoke with the Hebrew God. I would love to know more about the actors like Vera Francis, who played the Nubian servants, because they were some of the few actual black people to play a part of this movie, which is actually an African story. When Ramses' son dies, he finally decides to let Moses' people go, and he and his people head out in their powerful Exodus period. But Moses continues to perform miracles to keep his people safe. When Ramses changes his mind and sends his army to stop the Hebrews and take them back, Moses summons a pillar of fire from the sky that stops the Egyptian army. Moses then parts the Red Sea, which allows the Hebrew army to walk past on the bottom of the sea. And when Ramses' army tries to follow, the sea rushes back, drowning the Pharaoh's men. This is definitely one of the most epic parts of the movie. And though there's so many iconic scenes, including God giving Moses the 10 Commandments on the mountain, the sea crashing down on the Egyptians is one incredibly memorable scene, and likely was one of the biggest developments in visual effects of the time. Although this film, like so many others, whitewashes Egyptian stories, I think this film's story is generally important for African spirituality and mythological tales, and many people of faith still believe there are truths in this story, which is why it has endured as long as it has.